Anne of Cleves. Anne of Cleves was born in Germany. Henry VIII chose to marry her after seeing a portrait of her, but then didn't like her very much when they actually met. Their marriage only lasted a few months, but Anne stayed in England after they were divorced. She became friends with Henry's daughter Mary. So their time of love is very short because of not true love is being arise. Catherine Howard. Nobody really knows when Catherine Howard was born. She married she married Henry VIII in 1540, a few weeks after he divorced Anne of Cleves. He met because they had been one of Anne's ladies in waiting. They were only married a couple of years. Catherine may have a lot of affairs with another man, and King was furious about rumors, and she was thrown into Tower of London and later executed. So Catherine Parr, who is Catherine Parr? Catherine Parr married Henry VIII in 1543, a little over a year after Catherine Howard was executed in the London. She was good friend with all three of Henry's children. She married once more after Henry VIII died in 1547. Her fourth married, but then died herself after giving birth to her daughter in 1548. Thomas Cromwell. Um, Thomas Cromwell was Henry VIII chief minister for 8 years. He was very supportive for Henry's plans break with Catholic Church, and he helped Henry legally divorce Catherine of Aragon and Mary Anne Boleyn. After few years later, Thomas also arranged Henry's marriage with Anne of Cleves, and Henry wasn't happy with. Thomas was sent to the Tower of London and executed in 1540. So Thomas is the great friend of King Henry, but after after he arranged Henry's marriage with Anne Cleves, Henry was not happy, so that Thomas was executed in London. Thomas Greener. Thomas Greener was the Archbishop of Canterbury during both Henry VIII and Edward VI's reign. He helped Thomas Cromwell in arrange for Henry to divorce Catherine of Aragon. When Mary first became queen and changed the national religion of England to Catholicism, Thomas was in trouble because he was Protestant. He was put in prison and executed in 1556. So Thomas Greener and Cromwell was executed. Thomas More Thomas More was trusted friend of Henry and an important philosopher in Tudor times, but he was also a devout Catholic, which made things difficult when Henry wanted to break ties with Catholic Church and the Pope. He also disagreed the Henry plans to divorce Catherine. He was executed in the Tower of London in 1535, just under a year before Anne Boleyn was killed. So, in first, Thomas More and King Henry is a very great friend, but uh, when times when times King Henry divorced Catherine, Thomas More did not agree to his decision, and Thomas More continued to serve in Catholic Church, but through that, King Henry executed Thomas More in Tower of London in 1535. Um, did you know that Henry was not born to be king? He became the heir of throne at the age of 11. So King Henry was not featurized himself as a king. He was only the only thing he became a king because of the hair of his father na that 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 his father is a king of his place and being died when his older brother Arthur died. So he is the heirs of his, his father and his brother. Described as a golden prince, Henry wrote music and poetry when he was a young man. So King Henry is very intelligent because even in his poor age, and he he can he can wrote and play poetry, and he wrote Golden Prince. Henry VIII wanted people to be good at shooting a bow and arrow. So King Henry probably is very expert in taking bow and arrow. In fact, he made it a law that no one age 24 older can shoot a target less than 200 meters away, that longer than football pitch. That's what I am talking about. Henry was very tall for Tudor times. He was 1.87 meter tall, or 6 feet and 2 inches. At the time when the average man in London was 1.7 1.70 meter, or 5 feet and 5 inches. So King Henry is very tall. King Henry favorite battleship was called the Mary Rose and sank in 1545. Um, that is his favorite battleship. Henry got married 6 different times, but only his 6 wives outlived him. Two of Henry the eight wives were beheaded on the command, Anne Boleyn and Catherine Howard. So this Adeline and Catherine Howard is the beheaded on his command. They are King Henry is under in these wives. Henry VIII met his second wife Anne Boleyn because she was one of his first wife Catherine of Aragon maids. So probably Catherine Aragon is the boss of Anne Boleyn. He eventually divorced Catherine so he could marry Anne. Anne Boleyn was Queen Elizabeth the first mom. So that's the sequence of their relationship. One of Henry VIII's hobbies was falconry, which is a king of hunted using trained birds of prey called hawks. He also loved jousting, wrestling, and playing tennis. So King Henry had many once many recreational activities. As well as establishing the Church of England, Henry allowed the Bible to be translated into English and published. So, King Henry is, um, I remember that I remember my professor once said that um, if without King Henry, we cannot understand Bible because King Henry is the one responsible in translating Bible Bible in English so that we can all understand. Henry didn't like it when other important people in his court disagree with him. Sometimes he then sent them to the Tower of London to be executed. So he always sent people in Tower of London to be executed. King Henry the Eighth became king when his father Henry the Eighth died in 1509. Henry had an older brother Arthur, but he died in 1502, which meant that Henry was next in line of throne. Henry was the first wife. Catherine of Aragon was the first married with his brother Arthur. So Catherine was the ex of his brother Arthur, Henry's brothers. They did not only been married a few months when he died. Henry married Catherine 7 years later. So after his brother died, he married Catherine in 7 years later. Anne Boleyn, Henry's second wife, only had one child who survived, a girl named Elizabeth who would later become Queen Elizabeth I. King Henry VIII really wanted a boy through and became angry with Anne. Other people started not like Anne. Either she was arrested or executed in Tower of London. Because of the um, once of once of King Henry to have a son, he want to decided to being executed Anne Boleyn in the Tower of London. Before Anne died, Henry VIII had met Jane Seymour, whom he married a few days after Anne's executed. She gave birth to a boy which named Edward, which is what Henry really wanted, but then died a few days after Edward was born. So it is very sorrow for him because after he wanted to have a son, he died in a few days later. King Henry VIII, fourth wife was Anne of Cleves from Germany. They didn't meet before deciding to get married, and by the time the king did see her, he was not very impressed. He thought that marriage was not mistake, so divorced her. So he thinks that marriage is a mistake, so that he divorced her. Henry VIII, fifth wife was Catherine Howard. They got married a few days after Henry VIII. After Henry divorced Anne Cleves, Catherine was executed a couple of years later because Henry VIII, though she loved someone else. So King Henry is probably is he is very um he doesn't have respect for girls because after he used it, he will throw and executed it in the Tower of London. Henry got married one last time to Catherine Parr in 1543 and he remained married to her for the rest of her life, 4 years. So King Henry wants um, to give her the rest of her life with his wife Catherine Parr. Henry VIII wanted a son so badly because it meant that when he died, there wouldn't be anyone else who might try to claim that they should be king instead Henry's child. Even though princess could be queen, the things were clearer when titles could pass from father to son. So that goal of Henry is not successful because of the lack of time and she always wanting a son, but it is not being followed. So let's go to the next topic, which is King Edward VI, a jewel of King Henry VIII. King Edward VI, a jewel of King Henry VIII. King Henry the Eighth is one of the most legendary kings of England for many of wrong reasons. He gained a fearsome reputation among his subjects. Nevertheless, his break with the papacy, papacy in Rome established the Church of England and began the English reputation, which ultimately helped lead to the foundation of the United States. His two daughters would gain unforgettable legacies during her respective reigns, as well as yet little known about the male of her. Henry had sacrificed three wives and national stability for it in his opportunity short reign and life. King Edward VI of England still managed to stamp his own mark of history before being overshadowed quickly by his two half sisters. Edward grew up in coddle and educated. So King Edward is the son of King Henry VI. So he is the heirs of her throne. From the age of 6, Edward was educated at a philosophy, theology, and sciences, French, Spanish, and Italian. He was even said that a high intelligence of the film understanding monetary affairs. Visitors spoiled Edwards with toys and luxury that includes his own troupe to musicians. Both of Edward's sisters, Mary and Elizabeth, doted on their younger brother Edward. Wrote, wrote to Mary in 1546 that he loved her most, and Elizabeth to give him a share of her own working. Henry demanded his son's households be strictly secured and clean a little. Edward was this whole realm's most precious jewel. So it reminds to being responsible for his responsibility as well as the households be strictly secured and clean. Edward wrote to Mary in 1546 that he loved her the most, and Elizabeth gave the short and working. Henry demanded son secured and cleanly the little precious jewel. So that is uh, his father's wants. Edward wrote, Prince Edward was betrothed to a young boy. So in July 1543, King Henry VIII signed the Treaty Greenwich with the Scots with the would not only unite the two kingdoms but the betrothal between Edward 7 months old many queen of Scots. In a turn, even Scots in renounced the, the treaty 6 months later to renew their alliance with France. Henry was furious and ordered Prince Edward, uncalled Edward Seymour, Earl to Hertford to attack Scotland in possibly the most brutal military assault launched in England against the Scots. These were known as the Rathwowing would continue in Edward's reign. So, in this situation or time, the war is being executed in France because King Edward want to kill or to suffer the Scots and this were known as the Rathwowing. wrongdoing. So, in 1553, Edward was rapidly dying from a lung infection, most likely tuberculosis, and composed divers and royal succession. The device was most puzzling document of Edward's reign, a trick of elusive and shred of Viking. So King Edward rapidly dying because of his lung infection and most likely tuberculosis and composed of device. So Edward compiled the judicial and political establishment of his kingdom to sign the device while ignoring the lawful legitimate claims of Mary I and Elizabeth II to the throne. Edward recognized them both as illegitimate, especially Mary for her Catholic faith and her threat to dismantle Protestant efforts in England. So imagine the love of Edward to his sisters, and as what I mentioned earlier that King Edward has died for his lung infection, and in Edward compiled judicial and political establishments of his kingdom to sign the device while ignoring the lawful legitimate claims of Mary I and Elizabeth II. So that's all, and thank you for listening. Thank you.